we've been talking about rescissions, pocket rescissions, the big, beautiful bill. And one aspect of it that seemed to sort of kind of slip under the radar, we were talking about it about a week or so ago, a couple of weeks ago. And it has to do with the regulation of AI. So, on like part of this in this bill, there is a centralization of control of AI at the federal level, integrating AI into all of these, federal agencies, et cetera. But it bars, from the way the bill reads currently, states themselves from regulating AI. And I'm trying to figure out why that is. Is that a thing that's supposed to be beneficial? Is it a thing that's not? And the reason I'm questioning whether or not it's beneficial is because for the past, several years, our state AGs have really led the fight with a lot of the stuff against the Biden-Harris administration. And I'm just worried about how that would tie their hands if, because, Trump's out of office in 28. What happens after that? This is a 10-year thing. What does that mean? So joining us to discuss this, he's got a little bit of expertise in this area. It is a very good friend of ours, Congressman Rich McCormick. He serves Georgia's 7th Congressional District, and he's on a number of different committees, including the Cyber Information Technologies and Innovation Subcommittee. So he's kind of an expert on this issue, and we're going to talk to him about the other stuff related to it as well. Representative McCormick, so good to see you. Thank you for joining us. I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts about this provision or this part of this bill? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? I'm just worried about tying up our state's ability to regulate this themselves. Or is this a concern about the uniformity of the way that AI would be regulated? How do you interpret this?
First of all, great to be on your show. Big fan, obviously. I'm really, you're in trouble when you turn to a Marine to ask about intelligence. But I've been reading up on this, talking to the experts about this. Literally, if you think about the most transformative technology in our lifetime, AI is it. And when you talk about interstate commerce and actually even international commerce, look no further than something that's going to be affected by every law we make. Now, I get it. I'm a states' right guy. I totally want to see state rights dominate any sort of federal legislation. But it's separate in this case. Like when you talk about commerce, when you talk about, for example, the internet, when it first came along, if we would have regulated state by state, it would have totally inhibited it from being what it is today. Same thing with AI. Once you get a bunch of states with different legislative efforts, it would cross-contaminate the whole process of international trade, of interstate trade, of its ability to actually transform and progress. We would become non-competitive with China, most of all, not to mention Russia and Iran and other countries that are trying to develop AI at a rapid pace also. Whenever you become non-uniform, it slows the process down. This is something that if we fall behind on, you got to realize 50% of all AI engineering happens in China right now for the entire world. If we fall behind on this, we're in trouble. This will transform the landscape of economics and digital economy, as well as, don't forget, we're also competing with India. This would just really inhibit our process. It's not going to be, if it's dangerous, we can do things at the federal level to help with that. And I think we've shown great bipartisanship in this one area because we understand its dangers and also its ability to transform the future.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, too, because I think it's maybe the only singular area where Democrats and Republicans are like, we don't want Skynet. Let's not have Skynet come, and we don't want to do that. And I think it's a good point, too, because if it's about making things more efficient, which it seems like that's one of the reasons why they want to incorporate it at the federal level. But what is with the 10-year period? What is that? Just how much time they think that they're going to need for uniformity?
I think once you get to 10 years, everybody's going to see the advantages of having no interstate interference. Just like the internet, nobody talks about it anymore on the internet because why? Because it's already fully developed and we kind of do our own thing. Whether it be 5G or cable or whatever, we understand that whatever advances us quicker wins. And I think once you get past the 10-year period, people will accept that we don't need additional regulation. We have to have certain laws to make sure we don't have deep fakes or distort the truth, things like that. But I think we can universally agree on those truths. And we just faced this down in Georgia. As a matter of fact, one of my state senators took my advice and he said, we cannot pass legislation that's going to make us non-competitive against other states or decrease our competitiveness internationally. And I think it's a good thing. I think within 10 years, people will be like, this is the norm, and we haven't seen really bad things. And if we do, we can react as a federal government.
That was an important point that you just mentioned too, like deep fakes and things like that. So for those, because I think of like intellectual property and all that stuff. So for those existing like rights or legal concerns, it doesn't necessarily negate that simply because it's not at a state level and it's at the federal level.
Yeah, and the one problem we always have is how fast we're going to move at the federal level.
Yeah.
That's always a problem, and I get it. But I think we universally as a people understand what's bad and what's good when it comes to the internet, when it comes to AI and how it affects us. Nobody wants to see people deceived. And I remember when I was talking about climate change and I started referencing statistics, then all of a sudden disappeared off the internet because it supported my claims rather than my opponent's claims. That always concerns me. We want to make sure that people have access to the truth, to science, to peer-reviewed science specifically. So those are again things we want to make sure that we regulate so that we're not deceived as a public, so we can have legitimate conversations and debate without it being a biased debate controlled by the government. That would be bad, and that's the one thing that concerns me, and we need to put guardrails on.
And I know if this comes back to the House, if it's not taken out in the Senate, if the Senate doesn't strip it out, I mean, I think you can only afford to lose in the House 3 votes. And I know that there's already one. I know Marjorie Taylor Greene has said that she's not going to support it if it's included in there. I don't know how she didn't catch it the first time. I mean, she was tweeting about the budget a couple of weeks ago, and this thing was in there when everybody else was tweeting about it. That would have been the time to maybe act and try to fight it out of there if you didn't want it in there. Are you worried about, is that a big enough thing to disrupt that and to cost those 3 votes, you think, if it goes back to the House, is still within it?
Well, I hope that President Trump is paying attention. I think Elon is one of his advocates, and they get along with. But AI and tech people bend his ear all the time, and hopefully he can put leverage. I know that Marjorie is very sensitive to the president, and if the president says he wants it in there, it's going to remain in there. But I think it's good for our country. Without that provision, we become non-competitive, and I don't think that's good for anybody. So I'm not really sure what her objections are, other than maybe a states' rights issue. But like I said, I'm as big a states' rights issue as anybody. But in this case, it would actually hurt all states, including the United States, moving forward.
And that's a huge point that I actually have not heard made in defense of it being in the bill the way that it is. The fact that China would, and India's kind of, we have a weird sort of ally-ish relationship with India. I prefer them over China, obviously. But to have China lead on AI and development, I mean, just, if you could just, awaken people a little bit to the catastrophic consequence of something like that occurring.
There's nothing more transformative in the world society, in economics, in our ability to achieve great things into the future. If we're not leading the way in AI, we will not lead the way in economy, in military, in everything that's important to us, healthcare, you name it. Why would we ever put ourselves at a disadvantage against China on something that's easy to avoid, which has no real clear benefits of doing it any other way other than to centralize this ability to free us up from overregulating?
Yeah.
And you talk about regulation. Regulation is the absolute bane of our existence as conservatives. Why would any conservative want 50 different states with 50 different rules that inhibit us through regulation or taxation and make us non-competitive? That doesn't make sense to me as a conservative.
Yeah, the taxation part, that's another aspect of, I didn't think of. We're talking with Congressman Rich McCormick out of Georgia. So I know we have the rescissions, we have pocket rescissions possibly, and then the one big beautiful bill. The rescissions package that's been proposed so far, I mean, it's only $9-something billion, and only in D.C. can you talk about that like that's a tiny amount. I know that sounds crazy to say. A lot under what Doge was recommending to save for the year. I think theirs was $170 billion. But in the rescissions package thus far, I don't see anything other than the amount. I don't really see anything objectionable. Do you think how do you think Congress is going to handle the rescissions package? Does that seem like something, that request from POTUS, that you're going to grant?
Yeah, I saw a lot of liberals, I should say moderates, at a meeting today with Dan Bishop, and they didn't really seem to object to the things that we're saving. They're non-controversial issues. It's the tip of the iceberg, though. $9 billion is nothing when we consider we're going to increase our deficit spending, by $416 billion next year. That's not a responsible bill. I know people are getting on to Elon for trashing this bill, and I know I kind of voted for it with my nose held because I understand it's not a good bill for containing our debt and deficit. But it's the best thing we can get past this time. I'm hoping the Senate will do their part, give it back to us as a more responsible, and then rescissions can make it even better. But if we don't do something, you can see the future is not right for our debt.
Yeah, and the debt ceiling and then the tax cuts, because I know that there's been a lot with Russ Vought, and I know Stephen Miller and other people have been debating it. I think those have been some of my biggest issues is the debt ceiling being raised, because that indicates to me that some of the moderate Republicans have no plans whatsoever to cease spending. But not all the tax cuts are permanent. Like the no tax on tips. I feel like maybe the administration needs to be a little bit more transparent, because all that stuff sunsets in 2028. And Congressman, I don't have to tell you how tough it can be going into an election year, and you're trying to deliver on tax cuts when your opposing party tries to talk to everybody and act like they cost. That's going to be a little bit of a hard sell, and I don't know if that's going to be something that can be kind of clawed back or accomplished before 28 when it sunsets.
Yeah, not a good timing for us. I think that the promises, first of all, on a 10-year budget are silly. I don't even know why we have a 10-year budget. Once you get to 4 years and all of a sudden it becomes neutral, deficit neutral, that's 2 Congresses and a president from now. Let's talk about this Congress. That's about the only thing we control, and realistically. But when you talk about things that sunset, yeah, if it's a good idea, don't make it sunset.
Yeah.
I know it's about CBO scoring and parlor tricks, and they say, oh, then that tax break goes away, and look, now it's deficit neutral. Well, that's assuming we even have the growth. At that point, we could actually go into a more negative decline when you increase taxes and the economy slows. If it's a good idea, do it. Stop trying to worry about perceptions, worry about realities, and explain to the public. Take the time to actually explain why it's good. We all know that that 21% corporate tax rate seems to be the sweet spot on the Laffer curve. If you increase that, you actually decrease productivity, you decrease the number of jobs, you decrease the amount of revenue. Anything lower than that, you don't bring in the revenue to begin with. So we kind of find that we found that sweet spot. We should stick with it, make it permanent, and see how we do. And I think we've shown that it works well for us.
Well, we're going to watch and see what the Senate hands back to you all, and see what's kept in and what isn't. But that's if we're all still alive, because Senator Chuck Schumer, Representative McCormick said we're all going to die, and I was already dead because of net neutrality. So I don't know what he's talking about.
I thought I was Dr. Doom. When he started talking like that, that's a bleak future. Might as well resign and go on vacation, Schumer, because we'd all do a lot better at that point.
All right, there you go. Congressman Rich McCormick out of the great state of Georgia. Good to see you. Would love to have you back. Thanks so much for your insight on this. It is greatly appreciated. We'll talk again soon.
Look forward to it.
God bless. Take care.